Uzbekistan, what a place. Once a well-kept secret on the famous Silk Road, now in 2025 is trying to shine on the world stage. The Uzbek government has been massively pushing tourism over the last few years, with tourism numbers jumping from a few 100,000 in the early 2000s to a respectable 7.3 million in 2024. The Uzbek government aims to increase tourism to 50 million a year by 2030. Published tourism numbers by worldbank.org put the number of visitors to Uzbekistan higher than Brazil and not far behind Greece. Not too shabby at all, considering most people could not point it out on a map. This is a far cry from the days after Uzbekistan became independent, when the country was effectively closed off due to strict visa requirements and poor infrastructure. There is a good chance if you are watching this video, you are planning a trip to Uzbekistan in 2025, and this video is designed to help you learn more about the country you are visiting and point out some quirky things you might not be expecting. Whilst Dila, the other half of the Joyce Adventures, now lives in the UK, she spent her entire childhood in Uzbekistan, and we visited for 3 weeks in late summer 2024. You can watch the vlogs from our visit here on the channel. So consider this a local and a tourist perspective in one go. So without further ado, here are 11 things you should know about Uzbekistan. Number 1. We are assuming if you are watching this video, you are at least a flight away. So how do you actually get here? Uzbekistan has a major international airport in Tashkent. We recommend you fly to this airport if you are visiting the country. Through the national airline Uzbek Airways, you might even be able to get a direct flight from your country of origin. The airline is very reasonably priced and offers an exciting start to your adventure in Uzbekistan. You'll be sitting with many Uzbek people. Watch our travel vlog listed below to see our Uzbek Airways experience. Using the airline, you will also start your Uzbek adventure in Tashkent, which is definitely a soft landing. It is the most tourist-friendly city in the country and will give you a good base to move on to other destinations like Samarkand and Bukhara. Number 2. Uzbekistan is a double landlocked country. This is everyone's favourite fact about Uzbekistan. You need to know it before you go, meaning the country itself is landlocked and the countries around it are also landlocked. This sadly means no ocean, so yeah, leave your swimsuit at home. Number 3. We say Uzbekistan has good hospitality but bad customer service. If you make friends with an Uzbek person, or you stay at a local inn or hotel, they will take incredible care of you, and you will feel like a true VIP in their home or their space. Don't be surprised whilst you're in the country if you are welcomed to someone's table and are fed to death on copious amounts of hot plov or Uzbek dumplings. You will love it, but maybe your stomach won't. But also don't get too shocked if you go into a restaurant and are basically ignored for the whole experience, except for when they take your food order, and yeah, definitely when the bill comes, they'll want your attention then. Western expectations when it comes to customer service, especially if you're American or British, could go disappointed. This is not just a tourist perspective as well. Dila agrees that really high quality customer service is not part of the culture. Number 4. Do they speak a word of the kings in Uzbekistan? No, not really.
Well, if this is it, old boy, I hope you don't mind if I go out speaking to kings.
In Dila's family, only herself and her sister speak fluent English. And having visited the country, the fact that either of them can speak amazing English at all is a shock to me. Learning and speaking English is not part of the culture, and in Central Asia, there is no English language influence, so it's just not important. Less than 5% of the population can converse fluently in English. This is one of the lowest English-speaking rates in the world. Most restaurants will not have English menus, therefore Google Translate is going to be your friend everywhere here. Uzbek people generally converse in Uzbek. Outside of Tashkent especially, that will be people's preferred language. However, 90% of people do speak Russian, and nearly all can understand some basic Russian. This is because Uzbekistan was part of the former Soviet Union, so if you can speak Russian well, you will get along fine, but learning a few Uzbek phrases and words wouldn't hurt as well. Also, do not be surprised if people assume that you are Russian or have Russian heritage, because there's a sizable Russian population that live in Uzbekistan, and also many tourists visit from Russia as well. Also, don't be surprised if people, when they find out you're from Western Europe or the USA for example, you become an instant rock star and people want to meet you and speak to you. This happened to me on a road trip to the regional city of Fergana from Tashkent at a service station in Fergana Valley. The local woman who was running an Uzbek bread stand called all of her kids to come and meet me after I came to her stall. Dila explained to me that some of the local Uzbeks may have never met a Westerner before, so it was kind of a big deal to them at the time. Number 5. Something you will need to know if you're not staying in a hotel, so for example if you're staying in rented accommodation or with some locals, is that you will need to register your arrival and location with the police in the days after you enter Uzbekistan. You can actually do this online or in person at a local police station. All foreign citizens visiting Uzbekistan on a temporary basis, whether they need a visa or not, must submit documents for registration where they are staying within 72 hours. Registration in Uzbekistan is essential and unavoidable. To register online, you will need to go on the emihon.uz website, fill out the form, and at the end, pay the tourist tax. It costs around $20 for up to 1 month. You can also do this as well in person, but it is an annoying process, as you will need to physically visit the police station, get an appointment, wait for the appointment, and then fight other foreigners to keep your place in the queue. The whole process can take a couple of hours, so bear that in mind. It's definitely easier to do it online. If you're staying in a hotel, they will sort this out for you, so you don't need to worry. Number 6, and to be honest with you, this is actually the number 1 reason to visit Uzbekistan in the first place. Uzbekistan is the jewel in the Silk Road crown. The region has a truly glorious past and has at times been the envy of the world in terms of its wealth, cities, trade routes and culture. This makes it a must-visit location at least once, in my opinion. To appreciate this glorious past and understand the impact Uzbekistan has had on the world. In modern times, Uzbekistan is not a well-known country, although it has contributed to major advances in science, medicine, architecture and literature. Number 7. Speaking of reasons to visit Uzbekistan, there are some genuinely world-class tourist attractions like Registan Square, and the best part is, all the attractions we visited have a very small number of tourists. Some places were genuinely empty, and we were the only tourists there. This meant we could take our time and capture some amazing photos. Imagine being at the Eiffel Tower or Buckingham Palace and having the place to yourselves. It will actually be this reality in Uzbekistan. We visited during a national holiday, and it was still relatively quiet everywhere we went, so I'd recommend any time of the year to visit Uzbekistan. Number 8, and something else which is amazing from a tourist perspective is how cheap the country is, being one of the cheapest in the world. For example, the metro is pennies for a ride, taxis will cost you a couple of dollars for a standard journey, and a meal in a decent restaurant can be as little as $5 a person. The currency in Uzbekistan is Uzbek soms, and due to inflation, you will see some crazy denominations. For example, 1 million som is about £70 or $100. You can truly have a 5-star experience here for a relatively small amount of money. For example, I took Dealer's family out for the day at a luxury hotel where we had an Uzbek barbecue, swimming pool, enough food and alcohol for 12 people, and it cost me £120 or $150. Something like that in the UK would have been at least £600 or £700. What's great about Uzbekistan is you could probably budget for food, transport and experiences around $25 per person per day and have an amazing experience. So it's really great if you're on a budget. The flight to Uzbekistan is probably going to be the biggest expense of your trip, so once you're actually in the country and you're here and you're having a good time, it's actually really cheap. Yandex taxis. I mentioned how cheap Uzbekistan is. Where I found it to be crazy cheap is the taxis. In the UK, a 20-minute taxi ride can cost £30, £40. In Uzbekistan, that same trip can be as cheap as £1 to £2 per trip. Don't believe me? Download the Yandex app. The Yandex app is the Uber of Uzbekistan, and put in a trip from Tashkent airport to the centre, you will see some crazy low prices. The app is fantastic. It is as user-friendly as Uber and in English, so the language barrier when it comes to travel here is not an issue. You can even pick comfort class and drive around in a BMW or a Tesla for a tiny amount of money. Imagine swanning around in style with your own personal driver. It is genuinely that cheap. So you're probably thinking, why is it that cheap? Well, one of the reasons is the fuel. Methane is used for a lot of the vehicles as opposed to petrol or diesel. You will see large gas tanks strapped underneath trucks, for example, because of this. Number 10. Speaking of driving in Uzbekistan, I've been to India, China, Turkey, Italy, Thailand, all famous for crazy driving and roads. Nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to Uzbekistan. The driving is wild in a city like Mumbai, but because the traffic is bad, cars are moving slowly, and speed isn't a massive issue in the pedestrian areas. This is not the case in Uzbekistan. The scary thing about Uzbekistan is they have large, wide roads, and the traffic is not so bad, so cars will speed up to 50, 60, 70 miles per hour in the city centre. Pedestrians are treated as second-class citizens on the road. It is genuinely dangerous to walk around the road, so I'd recommend sticking to the path and using taxis where possible. You will see really crazy things like a car speeding up to a crazy level, only to find there's nowhere to go and then have to slam the brakes on so harshly, smoke billows from the wheel arches. Another terrifying experience I had was on the way to Fergana, we were stuck in traffic, and a bus got kind of bored of waiting, a public bus that is, and it literally just sped past us and went onto the side of the road, onto the curb. And as it hit the curb, the bus actually took off into the air. I have never seen this before. I mean, it must have been going, 40, 50 miles an hour. It must have been terrifying to be on that bus. But yeah, it was really strange and weird to see. Generally, the driving is just crazy. I was joking with Dealer that visiting as a tourist and seeing it all play out is like being in a Mario Kart race, but no one seems to agree where the finish line is. Here, driving on the road is like a competitive sport and a truly unique experience. I do not recommend renting a car. Use taxis for small distances or trains for intercity travel. The interesting thing is most of the people here seem very proud of their cars, and unlike other places with crazy driving like Turkey for example, where the cars can be all scuffed up, here often the cars look brand new and are in immaculate condition. Number 11, and speaking of cars, observing cars on the road is super interesting as a tourist visiting because you'll notice something very quickly. The vast majority of the cars are Chevrolet. In fact, 94% of new cars sold come from the American manufacturer. This is because General Motors partnered with the Uzbek government back in the late 2000s to run manufacturing plants in Uzbekistan, so it is the local manufacturer, I suppose. Uzbeks also like Chevrolets, as the roads in Uzbekistan are rough and bumpy, and being mostly desert, Uzbekistan is a harsh environment, and the cars need to be able to cope. Chevrolets are durable and relatively cheap to maintain, with parts easily accessible due to those manufacturing plants I was talking about. Furthermore, there is a super harsh import tax on cars coming from overseas. For example, if you wanted to import a Mercedes S-Class, it would cost in the range of $60,000 just to get it into the country. This is due to high customs duty and VAT. This is remarkable when you consider the car itself is worth around $100,000, so it's costing you the price of the car and then another 60% on top just to drive in Uzbekistan in your Mercedes S-Class. Therefore, driving a foreign car in Uzbekistan is a real status symbol. The other 6% of cars are typically the Chinese brand BYD or Soviet-era Ladas, which along with Japanese taxis are a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, to be honest. There is something really funny about seeing a 50-year-old Lada against the modern backdrop of Tashkent. So there you have it, 11 things you should know about Uzbekistan. Some of them you've probably heard before, but I'm hoping some of them are a bit unique and a bit quirky that you've probably not heard. I have got a few more of these and some more kind of weird ones, so I'll definitely do probably a second video where I do cover it. But anyway, thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next one.